Hello, learners. Welcome back to my channel, Learn with Harini. In today's session, we are going to have a look at a very important topic. Let's get into the session. So, we are going to see the last minute revision important points on Indian logic. In every exam, logical fallacies are being asked, be it English logical fallacy or the Indian logic. Today, Indian logic is quite difficult. So, let's have a look on the Indian logic. First one, what is major, minor, and middle term? If you're starting with logical reasoning, there are many questions which are asked based on the same. So, what is the major, minor, and the middle term? To begin with, a syllogism. What is a syllogism? Syllogism means there are totally two statements, that is, two statement one, statement two. The statements are called as the premises. So, premises, and then you have one conclusion. So, the premises and conclusion put together is called as the syllogism. And these in the syllogism, they are divided into major, minor, and middle term. This is very important to understand before moving into Indian logic. So, what is this major, minor, and middle? All birds can fly. Hen is a bird, therefore, hens can fly. One important thing for you to easily note is that middle term will not be present in the conclusion. Only the major and the minor term will be present in the conclusion. So here, if you have a look at this, the minor term. So the minor term will be in the subject of the conclusion, and the major term will be in the predicate of the conclusion. So there is a sentence like this. In this particular sentence, what is predicate, what is subject? Subject is the one that comes in the beginning of the sentence, and predicate is the one that comes in the end of the sentence. So here, if you see, the two major important points are minor term is present in the subject of the conclusion. You need to take conclusion into consideration, and major term is present in the predicate of the conclusion. So this is the conclusion. In the conclusion, middle term will not be present. What is the subject and what is the predicate here? Subject is hence and predicate is fly. Am I right? So here the minor term is the subject. So hen is the minor term and the major term is fly. So now you know the major and the minor term. Removing fly and hen, what is left over? Birds. So birds here are the middle term. So this is the basic meaning of the subject term, the subject predicate which has the major and minor in the conclusion, and middle term will not be present in the conclusion, and middle term will be present only in the premises. This is a very basic concept anybody should know. So now moving on, since you know what is major, minor, and middle term, the next one is the Fune sequence. What is the Fune sequence? Fune is Pratijna, Hetu, Udarana, Upamana, and Upanaya and Nigamana. So this is called as, the short form is called as the Fune sequence. I will tell you why we need to study, because in order to understand the Indian logic fallacy Hetva Bhasa, you need to know the basis of inference. So here Anumana. Anumana in Indian logic is called as inference. This is also one of the important questions that will be frequently asked. What is Pratijna? Pratijna is proposition, that is, the hill has a fire. You know there is a hill that has fire. So that is Pratijna. It's just a statement. Hetu. Hetu is the reason. Why there is a fire? Why can you see the fire? Because there is smoke here. Since I recognize the smoke, there is a fire. So that is the reason. Then Udarana. Udarana is example. What is the example? Whenever there is a fire, there is smoke. For example, in kitchen, when you work with fire, you obviously get smoke, right? So that is Udarana. Upanaya is application. Whatever you have known in these steps, you're going to put it into application. The hill has smoke. So the hill has smoke. which means there is a fire. Anything that has a fire causes smoke. So here the hill has smoke, which means there was a fire. And Nigamana is the conclusion part. Conclusion is therefore I'm concluding that the hill has fire. These are the 5 simple steps in how we are going to infer. Moving on. Now we've learned about the Fume sequence. The next important part in Indian logical is middle term. Where should it be present actually? There are totally 5 rules where the middle term should be present in the. I told you earlier, middle term will not be present in the conclusion. So it will be present only in the premises. These are the rules the middle term should be following. So Pakadharmata, it means middle term must be present in the minor term. Sometimes in exam, they can ask you what is called for the term where the middle term must be present in the minor term. It is called as what? And they might give you all these 5 options and you need to know that is called Pakadharmata. Then Tapaka Satra, it must be present in positive instances with the major term. And next one is Vipaka Satra. It should be absent in all the negative instances where the major term is also absent. So it is understood because it should be present in the positive instances where the major term should be present and it should be absent in the negative instances. Abadita, it should be non-compatible with the major term. Aviruddha, there should not be two contradictory reasons. If you see, these are the proper rules the middle term should follow. In any such case, when the middle term is not following any one of these rules, there occurs fallacy. This is when the logical fallacy Hetva Bhasa comes into place. Let's have a look on that too. So, like I mentioned, logical fallacy occurs when the middle term placement does not follow. So there are 5 rules which we learned in the previous slide. So what is the difference between formal fallacy and informal fallacy? Informal fallacy occurs when the meaning of the premises or the conclusion drawn is irrelevant or it doesn't have any sense. So that forms the informal fallacy. For example, the Western logical fallacy like hasty generalization, red herring, all that belongs to informal fallacy. Whereas formal fallacy, there is an error in the structure of the argument itself. That is, when the middle term is not placed accordingly in the premises, there is a structure error that causes formal fallacy. This question will also be asked, very important for your exam preparation. Moving on. Next is the most important topic and very important also. It is the logical Hetvabhasa falsies. Examples or the meaning can be asked in the exam. Savya Bikara was asked, and I have already told in my exam analysis, Savya Bikara fallacy was asked in the exam. Here, middle term is not uniformly related to the major term. It is called as Savya Bikara fallacy. Sound is eternal because it is audible. It doesn't make sense, right? When the sound is eternal, it is audible. The two statements, they are not related to each other. So that is Savya Bikara fallacy. Learn the examples which I have given in the slide very well, along with what that for particular Indian logic fallacy Hetvabhasa means. This is a sure short question in your exam. So Viruddha. Viruddha means that it is a contradictory middle. Sound is eternal because it is produced. So how can sound be eternal when it is produced? That is contradictory terms. The eternal, the word eternal and the produced are contradictory. The next one is Asiddha is sometimes called as Sadyasama. So whenever they asked with any one of the word for this, the meaning remains the same. It's called as the unproved middle term. Why is it unproved? Example, sky lotus is fragrance because it is like a lotus of the pond. Do you even know where the sky lotus exists? You know the lotus, right? You can't prove this. So it's unproved middle. Badita. Badita means non-inferentially contracted middle. Fire is cold because it is a substance. How can fire be cold? When it is a substance, how can you say that fire will be cold? It's non-inferentially contracted middle. Tatparipaka is middle term is contradicted by another middle term. Two statements come into place in this particular policy. Sound is eternal because it is audible. Sound is non-eternal because it is produced. It doesn't make sense. So these are the five important policy. In exam, they might be repetitively asking the same kind of examples. So you can read what is there in the slide. Moving on. So yeah, that's all. These are the most important terms I wanted to discuss for your last minute exam preparation. I've also made a lot of videos on Western policy, like the hasty generalization, red herring, strawman, and all of that. This particular PPT is all about the Indian logic, most important points. So this is just a gist. You have to cover in depth in the Indian logic. Keep preparing. All the very best for your exams.